Peace be upon you and welcome to a new episode. We're going to talk about a case with so many twists and such a mix of emotions that you might even find yourself sympathizing more with the perpetrator than with the victim. Back in 2009, there was this really famous lawyer, known for his integrity and honesty. He wouldn't take on any case unless he was completely sure the person he was defending was innocent. And if he ever found out that the defendant was lying to him about any detail, he'd withdraw immediately. One evening, this lawyer came home from his office and was having dinner with his wife when there was a knock at the door. When they opened it, they found a complete stranger standing there. They had no idea who he was, and he insisted on seeing the lawyer immediately, saying it was urgent. The lawyer gave him his business card and asked him to come to his office the next day, but the man said it couldn't wait. So, the lawyer had to invite him inside to hear what was going on. As soon as the man sat down, he started crying hysterically. The lawyer tried to calm him down so he could understand what the matter was. The first thing the man said was, "I've ended my wife's life, and all I ask of you now is to come with me to the police station, so I can be sure my confession is recorded exactly as it is, and that nothing will be changed." The lawyer was baffled. Here was a man sitting in front of him, confessing to killing his wife. What difference would it make to him if his confession was altered? It was impossible for the confession to be changed in a way that would exonerate him. The lawyer considered asking the man to leave his house, saying he didn't want to deal with someone who was confessing to such a thing in front of him. But the man insisted that if he heard the details, he would know he was 100% innocent. To find out what really happened, stick with the video until the end. Our story unfolds in Syria, specifically in the city of Deir el-Zor. There lived a man named Sami, who was in his mid-50s. Sami came from a very simple family. You could even say they were poor. He had 5 sisters and 5 brothers. Because Sami had so many siblings, his parents couldn't provide them with the basics of life, and his childhood was very difficult. Sami lived with his family in a village in the Damascus countryside. When he turned 16, he decided to leave the area where he had lived his whole life and move somewhere else to look for a job where he could build his future. Sami moved to Deir el-Zor and started looking for work there. He eventually met a man who owned a shoe workshop and a shop selling the shoes he made. This man was called Mr. Adnan. He was in his late 60s, and he lived entirely alone. He had been married, but his wife had passed away about 2 years before he met Sami due to cancer. As soon as Mr. Adnan met Sami and heard his story, he felt very sympathetic towards him and agreed to employ him in his workshop. Over time, Sami learned the ins and outs of the trade. Because of Sami's honesty, respect, politeness, and good morals, Mr. Adnan came to see him not just as an employee, but as a son. As time went on, their bond grew stronger and stronger. 9 years passed since Sami first met Mr. Adnan. By this time, Mr. Adnan was very ill, bedridden, and unable to move. Sami was the one who took care of him, attending to every detail, and he also looked after the workshop and the shop. In the final moments of Mr. Adnan's life, Sami was by his side. Mr. Adnan told Sami that he had written everything he owned in Sami's name through a sales agreement. Sami was shocked by what Mr. Adnan was saying and didn't know how to respond. Mr. Adnan explained that this was the least he could do to express his gratitude, and that in his final days, Sami had been like a true son to him. After Mr. Adnan's death, Sami fell into a deep depression and stayed that way for a long time, not leaving his house or interacting with anyone. But eventually, he realized that life had to go on, and that he had to continue Mr. Adnan's legacy and live up to the responsibility he had left him. When Sami returned to work, he didn't want to just stick to the workshop and the shop. He wanted to expand and develop further. He started hiring some workers to help him. Over time, the small workshop became a larger one, and the larger workshop became a factory. The shop became multiple shops. By the time Sami reached his late 20s, he had made a name for himself in the shoe industry. His brand had become the most famous local brand in Syria. He didn't just want his name to be known in Syria. He was also trying to export to some Arab countries. At this point, you could say Sami's story was an inspiring success for everyone around him, and he was a role model for all. Not only in how he started and where he ended up, but he was also very intelligent and knew how to deal with the people who worked for him. He always had a sense of empathy and never hesitated to stand by any of his factory or shop workers in times of crisis. Until one day, Sammy met a girl in her early 20s named Fatin. Fatin owned a small shop selling some shoes and would go to Sammy's factory to get shoes to sell in her shop. Over time, she started meeting Sammy in person. Gradually, after seeing each other, they started talking. Sammy learned about Fatin's story. She too had a difficult past. Her father had passed away when she was young, and she was the eldest of her siblings. Her mother was sick and couldn't go out to work to provide for them. Fatin had no choice but to go out and work to provide everything her siblings and mother needed. Sammy was very impressed by Fatin and everything she said. He saw her as a determined person, and you could say he saw the female version of himself in her. Over time, a mutual admiration grew between Fatin and Sammy. As more time passed, their relationship turned into love. Of course, because they were both hard-working and responsible people, the only natural step was to formalize their love through marriage. After their wedding, Fatin and Sammy lived a very happy life together. Fatin was very obedient to her husband, loved him dearly, and was ready to do anything for him. During their marriage, Sammy and Fatin had 3 children. Their eldest was a daughter they named Dana, followed by 3 sons. At this time, Fatin didn't do anything in her life except raise her children, please her husband, and take care of the house. Because Fatin took on all the responsibilities of raising the children, Sammy was able to focus on his work and grow it even further, until he eventually amassed a huge fortune. To match the life they were living and the social standing they had reached, Sammy and Fatin decided to move to one of the most upscale neighborhoods and lived in a very luxurious villa. Time passed after they moved into their new home, and their life was going perfectly until one day, a person entered their lives who would completely change its course. This person was called Aref, and he lived in one of the houses next to Fatin and Sammy's. He was 32 years old and worked as a doctor. As soon as Aref moved into the neighborhood and started getting to know all the residents, everyone loved and respected him. He was a kind, cheerful, and helpful person who never hesitated to help anyone who asked. For example, if someone from the neighborhood knocked on his door late at night asking for help because their son or daughter was sick, he would immediately leave his house and go to them to offer assistance, and he did all of this without any payment. Of course, because of Aref's actions, all the residents of the neighborhood saw him as a blessing of a neighbor. Sammy had indeed heard from some of the neighborhood residents about Aref and all the things he did for the neighbors, his generosity, politeness, and good morals. However, there had been no occasion for them to meet. One day, Fatin woke up screaming, feeling severe pain in her stomach. At that moment, Sammy didn't know what to do or how to act and was afraid something might happen to her before he could take her to the hospital. The first person he thought of was Aref, their doctor neighbor. He went and knocked on his door and took him to their house to treat Fatin. After examining Fatin, Aref diagnosed her condition as a case of poisoning. It was clear she had eaten something spoiled or something her stomach was sensitive to. He prescribed some medication, and indeed, after Sammy went and got the medicine and Fatin took it, she felt much better. When Sammy offered Aref payment for all the effort he had put in, Aref completely refused and treated the situation as he did all the situations with the other residents of the neighborhood. Even after that, he would go to Sammy and Fatin's house almost every day to check on her, see how she was doing, and if she needed anything from him. Of course, Sammy, with all of Aref's actions, saw him as a hard-working person who loved his job, considering medicine not just a profession but a calling. 3 months passed since Fatin's illness and Aref's visits to their home. One day, Fatin was sitting with Sammy, talking about Aref. She praised him, speaking of his good morals, his kindness, and his actions towards all the residents of the neighborhood. At that moment, as Sammy watched Fatin's enthusiasm while talking about Aref, he felt a pang of jealousy. He was bothered that his wife was praising someone else other than him. At that moment, Sammy started listening to his wife's words and discovered that she knew details a great deal about Aref, which meant she was very keen to know every little detail about his life. This made him very jealous. and he decided not to keep it to himself. He told her directly that he didn't like all the talk about Aref, and that he didn't like her praising anyone else but him. At that point, Phaeton asked him to calm down and began to explain. She told him that she knew all these details about Aref because Aref himself had asked for their daughter Dana's hand in marriage and wanted to marry her. Of course, as soon as Sammy heard this news, he was overjoyed. Firstly, because his daughter Dana had grown up and reached the age of marriage, and suitors had started asking for her hand. Secondly, he felt a great sense of relief that his wife Phaeton loved him and didn't see any other man. Sammy told Phaeton that he had no objection to meeting him, getting to know him, and seeing Dana's opinion. At that time, Dana was about 20 years old. When she and Aref sat together, there was a connection and a sense of comfort between them, so they got engaged. A few months after Aref and Dana's engagement, Dana went into a severe psychological state. She would scream, shout, and break everything in front of her, eventually collapsing on the floor and having to be taken to the hospital. No one understood the reason for her nervous breakdown. When she started to regain control and consciousness, she went straight to her father and told him that she didn't want to continue her engagement to Aref and that she couldn't marry him. Her father tried to find out the reasons and motivations. Had Aref done anything to her that made her refuse to marry him and led to her breakdown? But at that time, Dana refused to reveal anything and told her father that the matter was closed, that she didn't want to marry Aref and didn't want to disclose the reasons. When her father tried to pressure her further to find out the reasons, Dana decided to leave home. She packed all her belongings and moved to her maternal grandmother's house. At this point, Sammy truly felt that his daughter had reasons, strong reasons, to end the idea of marrying Aref. He felt sorry for Aref and was very upset because he saw Aref as an excellent young man with a future, and he thought his daughter would be very happy with him. But as you know, the decision, in the beginning and the end, is the girl's own. So, Sammy had no choice but to go and sit with Aref, talk to him rationally and logically, and tell him that Dana was not willing to marry him. Aref was shocked and didn't understand why Dana had done this. He had no explanation for her behavior. But in the end, he respected her decision and accepted the reality. After a while, a letter arrived at Sammy's office. The letter had a note saying it must be delivered to Sammy personally, by hand. When he opened the letter, there was a piece of paper with a photo attached. The paper had a single sentence written on it. "Your wife is having an affair with your daughter's fiancé." As soon as Sammy saw this, he was in shock, but deep down, he was sure that someone was fabricating this and that it had no basis in truth. When he looked at the photo, he discovered it was of his wife Phaeton sitting with Aref. They were both sitting together in a disco lounge. From the picture, it looked like two people talking normally, but the place they were in didn't suggest the same. Initially, Sammy thought it was possible that Aref was trying to meet Phaeton to rekindle his relationship with Dana. But if he wanted to meet Phaeton, he certainly wouldn't take her to a disco lounge to talk there. At that moment, Sammy was very confused and didn't know what to do or how to act. So, he decided to look for the truth and realized that the only place he could find out the truth was in the residential area where he lived. He asked some people to go to his neighborhood and inquire about Aref, Phaeton, and the extent of their relationship. The shocking news was that when these people returned to Sammy, they confirmed that all the residents of the neighborhood were saying that Phaeton and Aref were in a relationship and that their relationship had reached advanced stages. At this point, it became clear to Sammy how much everyone knew the truth, and he was the only one who didn't know what was happening. Sammy realized the reasons why his daughter Dana had ended her engagement with Aref and why she would have nervous breakdowns whenever anyone mentioned his name. Not only that, but when they tried to pressure her to find out the reasons, the girl left home and went to live with her grandmother. All of this explained the behavior that Sammy had witnessed, but couldn't understand. Sammy was in shock, and couldn't believe how Phaeton could let things reach this stage, and also that all the residents of the area knew about the relationship between her and Aref, and she was accepting all the situations she had put herself in. So, he saw that there was no other solution but to go and confront her directly with all the details he had learned. As soon as Sammy stood in front of Phaeton and confronted her with the photo and the message, She immediately started crying and offering apologies. She swore that she wouldn't repeat this behavior and repeatedly vowed that no one else occupied her heart or mind but him. Sammy was moved by Phaeton's words and believed everything she said. He decided to give her a second chance to rebuild the trust she had shattered within him, but with one condition. Sammy's condition was that they move to a residential area far away from the neighborhood they were living in. He certainly couldn't stay in the same neighborhood after being sure that everyone there knew the details of Arif and Fatin's relationship. Despite Fatin loving her house and the neighborhood she lived in and not wanting to move, she had no choice but to accept all of her husband Sammy's conditions. After they moved from their neighborhood, Sammy went to his daughter Dana and tried to get her to come back home. But Dana had no intention of returning. At that point, the father decided to confront Dana, telling her that he knew all the details about her mother's relationship with her former fiancé, and that her mother had sworn to him that it was just a mistake that wouldn't happen again, and that she had to forgive. But Dana couldn't accept the situation as her father had. She told him that she would continue to stay at her grandmother's house. The father left his daughter completely at ease. A whole year passed during which Phaeton tried in every way to please Sammy and did everything to make him happy, content, and satisfied. I assure you that Sammy and Phaeton's young sons, who were studying at university at the time, had no idea about the details of what had happened. Sammy explained their move from the neighborhood simply by saying that he felt the neighborhood was no longer as upscale as it used to be. Until the summer of 2009 arrived. It was Sammy and Phaeton's wedding anniversary. As he did every year, Sammy, who used to celebrate their anniversary, contacted his daughter Dana and asked her to come home to celebrate with them. Dana completely refused, but her father insisted. Because of his insistence, Dana agreed to his request. After Sammy prepared everything, the cake, the knife, and the dinner for him, his wife, and his children, Phaeton went to the bathroom to take a shower and get ready. She took off her wedding ring and placed it in the bedroom. Sammy was thinking that when she came out of the bathroom and got ready, he would put the wedding ring back on her finger in front of the children, creating a romantic scene and atmosphere. But while Sammy was holding the wedding ring and looking closely at it, he found that what was engraved inside wasn't his name. It was Arif's name. At that moment, Sammy didn't know what to do or how to act. All he knew was that his children shouldn't be in the house while he was talking to his wife. So he went downstairs and asked his 4 children to go to their mother's parents' house, stay there, and not return until he called them, telling them he needed to discuss something private with their mother. The children suspected nothing, took their things, and left. Sammy waited for his wife downstairs. When she was ready and came down, believing they were waiting for her to celebrate, she was surprised when Sammy confronted her with Arif's name engraved inside the ring. Contrary to what one might expect, that Phaeton would break down and try to appease Sammy and apologize as she had before, Fatin at that moment spoke with utter insolence. She told Sammy that she loved Arif, that she couldn't live without him, and that she wanted to marry him. She said that he was the man who made her feel like a woman, that she had wasted her youth raising the children and had ruined her life, and that Sammy owed his success entirely to her. The least of her rights was to live her life the way she wanted and to reclaim her youth, which, according to her description, Sammy and their children had drained from her. Sammy stood there, facing his wife, whom he loved and saw as his whole world, as she stood and told him that she loved another man, that Arif was the love of her life, and that she couldn't live without him. He couldn't comprehend the extent of her audacity, nor could he process the words she was saying. When he finally understood, indeed, all the words he heard came from Phaeton. He didn't realize what he was doing until he pulled out the knife he had intended to use to cut the cake and plunged it once directly into Phaeton's heart. Phaeton fell to the ground and didn't move at all. Sammy, after coming out of his shock and realizing the magnitude of the disaster he had brought upon himself, knew it was too late to save Phaeton's life, and was certain he had ended her life. Sammy was telling all of this to his lawyer, Kamal. After hearing all the details, Kamal decided to stand by Sammy and said he would never abandon him. They would go to the police station immediately, and Sammy would give his full statement. Kamal promised that during the trial he would try to explain all the details and exonerate Sammy. Indeed, Sammy and Kamal went to the police station, and Sammy gave all the details and confessions he had recounted. They then went to Sammy's house to verify the truth of his statements. They found that the place was indeed prepared for a celebration, just as Sammy had said, and that Phaeton was lying in front of the table, and the knife used to stab her was still embedded in her body. Phaeton's body was transferred to forensic medicine. Sammy was asked to reenact the crime, and he did everything they asked, confessing to everything and not denying anything. However, he insisted that he had been forced and not fully conscious when he stabbed Phaeton. The police at that time didn't fully believe Sammy's words, so they decided to go to the old residential area where he and his wife and children had lived, and also to the new residential area they had moved to. They started conducting some investigations there, asking about Phaeton's behavior, and if they had noticed anything suspicious about her. To their surprise, in both her old and new residences, everyone around Phaeton knew the details of her betrayal of her husband Sammy, and that she was having a relationship with a younger man who was a doctor named Arif. Some of the neighbors in the new neighborhood they had moved to even told the police that some of them had actually advised Phaeton to stop her infidelity and to fear God in her home and with her children. This was after they saw Arif frequently visiting the house and staying with her for long hours when Sammy and the children were not at home. But Phaeton was not willing to listen to any advice. Anyone who confronted her, she continued on Arif's path, and he had completely controlled her. She was unable to end her relationship with him. Among the people who were questioned was Dana, Sami, and Phaeton's daughter. She also gave the same statements and revealed the reasons why she had broken off her engagement with Arif and why she had moved out of the house to live with her grandmother. She confirmed to the police that her mother was indeed having a relationship with her former fiancé, and that she knew their relationship was ongoing and had not ended. That was why she had refused to return home. Sammy's case was transferred to court, and the charge against him was premeditated murder. However, his lawyer Kamal argued in court, trying to convince the jury that the crime was not premeditated murder, but merely a misdemeanor. When the judge asked him how it could be a misdemeanor when a crime had been committed with a weapon that was readily available, and that Sammy himself had confessed to providing the weapon at the place where he ended Phaeton's life, Kamal explained in the courtroom that according to the law, when a husband discovers his wife in flagrante delicto with her lover and ends her life, the matter is not treated as murder but only as a misdemeanor. The judge told the lawyer, but there was no flagrante delicto. Phaeton and Sami were alone in the house. Arif was not with them. However, Kamal wanted to explain to them that there was a form of flagrante delicto, but it wasn't a physical one. It was a mental one. He explained in the courtroom that at the moment Sammy confronted Phaeton about her relationship with Arif and his name engraved on their wedding ring. She faced him with utter insolence and boldness, telling him that she loved Arif. This created a scene in Sami's mind that made him see his wife's betrayal in vivid detail. Phaeton's words and her confrontation with Sami about loving Arif caused Sammy to lose control and not be responsible for his actions. Moreover, Kamal referred to the forensic report, which proved that Sami had stabbed Phaeton once directly in the heart, ending her life. They said that the stab wasn't forceful enough, meaning Sammy didn't actually intend to end Phaeton's life. But because the stab reached a sensitive spot and directly pierced the heart, it killed her. The forensic report also stated that Phaeton was completely unharmed, without any scratches or bruises, meaning Sammy hadn't even tried to assault her before ending her life. In short, Kamal argued in court that Sammy's attack on Phaeton was an emotional outburst, not premeditate. When asked why he had sent his children to their grandmother's house under the pretext of needing to talk to their mother about something and not wanting them to be present, Kamal replied, based on Sammy's statements, that Sammy didn't want to tarnish Phaeton's image in the eyes of their young sons. He felt it was enough that Dana knew about what her mother had done. He shouldn't break his young sons' spirits by letting them know that their mother was completely unfaithful. Among those summoned by the court to testify in the case was Arif. When they went to the house where he had been living, they found no trace of him. When they tried to look for him in any files or records in hospitals, given that he was supposedly a doctor working there, they discovered that Arif was not a doctor at all. he had merely pretended to be one. Arif had indeed studied medicine at some point in his life, but he hadn't finished his studies. He then decided to target very upscale neighborhoods, settle there, and as soon as he did, he would start getting to know the neighbors, playing the role of the kind and helpful neighbor to make everyone there like him. After that, he would target one of the women living there, someone rich and young whom he could deceive with his sweet talk, convincing her that he loved her and saw no one else as his life partner. Once he convinced her, he would start taking all the money he wanted from her. Police investigations proved that Arif had done this more than once in more than one neighborhood with more than one woman. In short, you could say he was a con artist who swindled in the name of love. The person Phaeton had betrayed her husband, her daughter, their trust, and everything she had lived with them in happiness for, was nothing but an illusion, a mirage, and had no real existence. In any case, the police continued their search for Arif, but couldn't locate him. Until one day, they received a report from some neighbors who said that their neighbor, who had moved into their apartment building a short time ago, had a very strong odor coming from his apartment. When the police went and opened the apartment, they discovered a body inside that was in advanced stages of decomposition. When they went back to the landlord to find out who this person was, they discovered it was Arif. The forensic report proved that Arif's death was not natural. Someone had entered and ended his life. When the police tried to find out who had killed Arif, they couldn't find any leads because he had multiple relationships, and the people he had conned, who undoubtedly felt hatred towards him and wanted to take revenge, were numerous. Therefore, Arif's murder case was closed as a case against an unknown perpetrator. When Kamal received the news that Arif had been killed, and that the case was closed against an unknown perpetrator, he went to give Sami the news a few days before the verdict in his own case was to be announced. Kamal was surprised when Sami already knew about it. When he asked how he knew, Sami told his lawyer that he was the reason for Arif's death. When Kamal asked how he had done that while in prison, Sami confessed that he had hired someone, a hitman, and paid him to go and end Arif's life, so he could feel internally that he had washed away his shame. When Kamal heard these details, he didn't know what to do. He couldn't remain silent about everything Sami had told him, but at the same time, his profession required him to keep his clients' secrets. So he had no choice but to remain completely silent and pretend that everything Sami had told him had never happened. The court was indeed convinced by everything Kamal had said, that there was indeed a mental state of flagrante delicto in Sami's mind, and that his wife, due to her actions and betrayal, had made him unable to control his nerves or his actions. Therefore, in a fit of rage, he had pulled the knife and stabbed her, ending her life. At the end of the trial, Sami was sentenced to 1 year in prison with a suspended sentence. Sami had already spent this time in prison during the trial period, and was released immediately after the trial, a few days later. Sami went back to his work and his normal life, completely forgetting about Phaeton and everything she had done to him. His daughter Donna got married, had 3 children, and moved with her husband to Germany. His 3 sons graduated from university and had excellent jobs. After the crisis in Syria in early 2011, Kamal moved to settle permanently in Turkey. In 2019, 10 years after the crime in which Sami ended Phaeton's life, Kamal was sitting in a restaurant in Istanbul, Turkey, and was surprised by a man standing in front of him. At first, he didn't recognize him, but the man introduced himself. It was Sami himself. Kamal was very happy to see him by chance in a country other than their own. They sat together and started talking. During their conversation, Kamal asked Sami who the person he had hired to kill Arif was and how he had hired them while in prison. At that moment, Sami decided to confess something to Kamal that no one could have imagined. Sami told him that he hadn't killed Arif or anything, and that one of his young sons was the one who had killed him. What had happened was that while Sami was in prison awaiting his trial, and his children were visiting him, one of his sons explicitly told him that he would kill Arif and that he was looking for him everywhere. Indeed, one of Sami's sons, whose name Sami didn't specify to Kamal, managed to kill Arif, and the news reached Sami before Kamal told him. At that moment, Sami said he had decided internally to confess that he was the one who committed the crime, and had told Kamal this, so that if Kamal decided to report him, there would be an official confession from him, and the accusation would fall on him, and no one would suspect his son. Kamal sat listening to Sami's words, not believing what he was hearing. Sami then said to him, "And I have another confession I'd like to tell you. I didn't kill Phaeton." Kamal couldn't believe what Sami was saying, and asked him, "How?" "I'm already convinced that one of your sons might have killed Aref, but your wife Phaeton, how could you not have killed her?" At that moment, Sami began to recount to the lawyer the true and real details, the original version of everything that happened on his and Phaeton's wedding anniversary. What happened was that on the wedding anniversary, when Sami had planned to have a party for his wife and celebrate with his children, as I told you, he had asked Dana to come and attend the party. Dana did indeed arrive at the house. At that moment, Sami asked her to go up to her mother's bedroom to greet her and try to forget the past. Dana, because she loved her father very much and felt sorry for him, listened to his words. When Dana went up to her mother's bedroom, she found that her mother was taking a shower in the bathroom. At that moment, she saw her mother's wedding ring. When she picked up the ring and was turning it over, as if to pass the time, she discovered that Aref's name was engraved inside her parents' wedding ring. So, she decided to confront her mother. She didn't wait for her mother to come out of the bathroom. She took the ring, went downstairs, and showed it to her brothers and her father. She started telling them that Aref's name was engraved inside the ring, and that her mother was having an affair with Aref, and that the relationship was still ongoing. Once Phaeton came out of the bathroom, got ready, and went downstairs to celebrate with her children and husband, Dana confronted her with the ring and the name engraved inside. Phaeton began to provoke Dana, telling her that Aref would never want a child like her, and that he wanted a mature and sensible woman like Phaeton, and that he preferred her over Dana. She started going into details, saying that Dana was a child and wouldn't understand the feelings and emotions between her and Aref. She said all of this with utter insolence in front of her husband Sami and her 3 young sons. At that moment, Dana didn't realize what she was doing until she grabbed the knife from the table and plunged it directly into her mother's heart. This explains the forensic report when it said that the blow that ended Phaeton's life wasn't a strong blow because it wasn't a man's blow, but a girl's blow. However, with Sami's confessions, no one paid attention to this. Sami continued to recount the rest of the night's details, and told Kamal that at the moment Phaeton fell dead on the floor. He asked his 3 young sons to take their sister and go with her to their grandmother's house, pretending to be completely normal and not showing any tension. Sami said that he had completely wiped his daughter's fingerprints from the knife and held the knife himself so that his fingerprints would remain on it. He then began to erase any traces of Dana that would indicate she was the one who ended her mother's life. He also studied the angles where Dana had been standing so that when he came to reenact the crime, it would be convincing to the police. When Kamal asked him why he had done all these things, Sami replied very simply, "I lost my reputation and my honor, and I wasn't prepared to lose another one of my children. I wanted them to live their lives normally and not pay the price for their mother's wrong choice. I felt at that moment that I had lived my life with its ups and downs, but my children still had their future ahead of them. I wasn't prepared to see one of my children lost because their mother had abandoned the years of companionship, the bread and salt, the love and loyalty between us." Kamal himself recorded all the details of this story in his memoirs, but of course, to maintain confidentiality, he changed the names, dates, and locations where the events took place. Phaeton, unfortunately, had lived a very happy life with her children and husband, and nothing was missing in her life. But Aref's entry into her life was like a devil who was looking for her weak spot and managed to find it when he realized that her husband was a businessman whose time was all occupied and who didn't have time to devote to his wife all the time. Aref started to play on this weakness, but let's agree that Phaeton was willing to accept the words Aref was telling her. Aref initially created an entry point by proposing to Dana, but in reality, he wanted to get close to Phaeton, instead of rejecting him and ending his relationship with her daughter, and seeing him as a manipulative person who didn't deserve to marry her daughter or even get close to them. She did the exact opposite. She saw herself as a beautiful and desirable woman, and Aref's words brought back her lost youth. In the end, it turned out that Phaeton had been deceived in the name of love. Not a single word Aref told her was true. He neither loved her, nor was he a doctor, nor did he intend to marry her. In short, You could say that Phaeton lost everything for something that was nothing but an illusion. In return, Sammy decided to preserve everything, and above all, to protect his children, even if the price for protecting them was losing himself and his life. Sammy and Phaeton had lived together for many years, and Phaeton used to point the finger at Sammy, accusing him of only thinking about himself and his work. But in the end, it turned out that Phaeton was the one who only thought about herself, while Sammy's children and his home were all that occupied his thoughts. And with that, we have reached the end of our story. Thank you very much for watching. If you like this type of content, don't forget to hit subscribe button and activate the bell so you receive all the new videos, and wait for me every Saturday, Monday, and Wednesday for a new story. See ya.